T.S. Eliot, in the famous opening line of a famous poem, The Wasteland, T.S. Eliot wrote, and I quote, "April is the cruellest month." Well, T.S. Eliot was wrong. April is a beautiful month, a sublime month. Among other things, it is giving Brown University an opportunity to welcome Rahul Gandhi. And have serious intellectual discussions with him about culture, about religion, about politics, about economic and social policy, and even science, something we have been doing since the last evening. I'm Ashutosh Varshney, Director of the Saxena Center for Contemporary South Asia at the Watson Institute, and a professor in the Political Science Department. I welcome you all to this conversation with Rahul Gandhi. Currently, Rahul Gandhi is the leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha, India's directly elected lower house of parliament. Unlike the US Senate, India's upper house, the Rajya Sabha, is indirectly elected. As a result, the lower house in the famous of parliament is the principal opening line foundation of political of a famous poem. He has been elected 6 times as a member of parliament. T.S. Eliot wrote 4 times from the North Indian April state of is Uttar the cruellest month. Well, T.S. Eliot was wrong. April is a beautiful month, a sublime month. Among other things, it is giving Brown University an opportunity to welcome Rahul Gandhi. And have serious intellectual discussions with him about culture, about religion, about politics, about economic and social policy, and even science, something we have been doing since the last evening. I'm Ashutosh Varshney, Director of the Saxena Center for Contemporary South Asia at the Watson Institute, and a professor in the Political Science Department. I welcome you all to this conversation with Rahul Gandhi. Currently, Rahul Gandhi is the leader of the opposition in the Lok Sabha, India's directly elected lower house of parliament. Unlike the US Senate, India's upper house, the Rajya Sabha, is indirectly elected. As a result, the lower house of parliament is the principal foundation of political power in India. He has been elected 6 times as a member of parliament, 4 times from the North Indian state of Uttar Pradesh, also called UP, and twice from the southern state of Kerala. He's also a former president of the Congress Party. Once only?
Yeah.
I said former.
Once from Kerala.
Okay. The plan for the conversation is as follows.
Well, you can say 2 times, but then I gave it up.
Okay. The plan for the conversation is as follows. Rahul Gandhi and I will have a discussion of about 45 minutes or so, which will be followed by audience questions for at least half an hour. There are 2 microphones on either side of this auditorium on the aisle. Please form a line, a queue, once Q&A begins, which I'll announce. And to maximize participation, I would like the question to be brief and precise, and the questioner, after asking the question, should go back to the seat. There will be no follow-up questions, in other words. Following Brown rules, you are free to ask any question you like, but thoughtful brevity will indicate that you're a Brown member of a Brown community. The Q&A will be further followed by half an hour of reception outside, when the audience can mingle with Rahul Gandhi for half an hour more. Before I get to my questions, we start with a 5 to 6 minute opening statement from Rahul Gandhi about the 2 most important issues in Indian politics today. And after that, I will engage him in a discussion for 45 minutes or so. So would you like to come here?
Yeah. Thank you, Ashutosh. You were saying T.S. Eliot said that April was a terrible month? Cruelest month. And you said it's a great month. It, of course, always depends where you're standing. So if you're in Brown University in April, it's quite a nice month. And if you're in the battlefield of Ukraine in April, it's quite a terrible place. And I think that idea that different people have completely different perspectives, different people have completely different experiences, lies at the heart of Indian thought. There are three things I'd like to say instead of two. Two things that are going on in India, and one thing that is broader taking place in the rest of the world. As far as the rest of the world goes, and I think President Trump diagnoses the problem accurately, production has been monopolized by China. Manufacturing has been monopolized by China. It is impossible for large countries to get employment for their people without a manufacturing base, without large-scale production in their countries. And the fact that production is monopolized by China is creating all sorts of political problems in the United States. In India, it is polarizing society, and it is completely transforming the politics. So that's one frame. The second frame, India in its constitution is a union of states, multiple languages, multiple traditions, multiple religions, different communities, all with different visions of India. And that idea of India as a union of states is under attack, systematic attack, by a narrow ideology, which is attacking our institutions, attacking our democratic foundation, and essentially attacking the voice of large numbers of communities in India. And finally, the third thing, which I think is equally important, is the participation of lower castes, weaker sections, Dalits, tribals, backward castes in the political infrastructure of our country, in the governance of our country, and in the participation of development in our country. So those three frames I would like to place in front of you. They're interrelated, they work together, they have to be seen together, and they're interrelated. So that's broadly how I would like to frame the discussion we're having today. Thank you.
Politics is often viewed as having two sides. On one hand, it's a pursuit of power, for which elections are the primary medium. On the other hand, it's an instrument of social change, for which movements are thought to be the main medium. Some observers have commented that you are uncomfortable with the idea of politics as a pursuit of power, and more comfortable with the idea of politics as a bedrock of movements, most remarkably reflected in the Bharat Jodo Yatra, which can be roughly translated as March for Uniting India. You once commented that power was a form of poison. What is your view of politics as a pursuit of power?
I wouldn't draw the distinction so clearly between movements and power. Large movements contain political power in them. And then if you're going to divide so clearly, then how do you explain a Mahatma Gandhi who doesn't hold political office, certainly doesn't quest for personal power, but is by far the most powerful man in India politically when he's operating, right? So I think when I said the line power is poison, you don't ingest poison, but you certainly, poison is used quite effectively for many, many different things, but you don't ingest it. So I find the blind desire for personal power distasteful. I don't like that aspect of it. But to say that I don't think that power is important and that power shapes society, power shapes politics, I think that's not correct. I just don't like that blind thirst for power. And it's very interesting. Now when I look back, the last 10 years, 15 years, a very interesting thing has happened, which is that a lot of the people who went blindly for power because of the way the system is shaped now in India are pretty much powerless. Because now that blind desire to get power has trapped them. That's what a lot of the corruption cases are about. So I'm against this blind rush towards getting personal power. Is power used in politics? Absolutely. Do I use power every day in politics? Absolutely. And do movements generate massive amounts of power? Absolutely.
Thank you.
I think, at least in the Indian frame, serious political people, and I would consider many of the people operating in our freedom movement as serious political people, have always had the sense of self-restraint embedded in their politics. You can see that in Gandhiji, you can see that in Mr. Ambedkar, you can see that among all the big freedom fighters. There is always this sense that I need to be disciplined, restrained personally. And I can be completely restrained personally and very effectively use political power to help people or to shape things.
Gandhi certainly did not see the need to be in government to exercise power and to shape society. Gandhi, I think, except once, never accepted any formal positions. But Jawaharlal Nehru was Prime Minister for 17 years, contested elections in 52, 57, and 62, and used power to seek to transform society, transform India. Is the Nehruvian view of the use of power, which was also quite restrained, but in many ways instrumental in bringing about fundamental changes in India, is the Nehruvian view of the use of power or the pursuit of power a view you would agree with?
Yeah, I mean, you mean the electoral view?
The electoral, using elections.
I'm a member of parliament, so I by definition agree with it already. But I think there's place for both those ideas, right? Gandhiji is trying to do something slightly different than Nehruji is trying to do. I think there's quite a lot of space for both.
There's a lot of debate in international circles about democratic backsliding in India. In the scholarly analyses, this debate is conducted in the framework of democratic theory, which lays out two conceptions of democracy. There is a minimal conception, which is purely electoral, and which asks only two questions. Can rulers be freely contested in elections? And can all adults freely participate in elections? One is about participation in elections, one is about contestation of the rulers. There is a second view, which is broader, which goes beyond elections and covers how governments conduct themselves in the 4 to 5 years between elections. Under this broader conception, we, the scholars of democracy, especially refer to the following freedoms: freedom of expression, freedom of association, which is basically freedom for civil society, freedom of religion, and protection for minorities. Scholars believe that India's backsliding is more in the broader realm, the realm between elections, less in the electoral realm. Even today, 8 to 10 out of 28 states of India repeatedly are won by parties that do not rule in Delhi. In the last elections, the BJP could not win a majority, and the Congress party, your party, nearly doubled its seats. What is your view of India's democratic backsliding?
I mean, I think it's on both sides. Certainly, it's very, very clear that it's on the institutional side. The intelligence apparatus, the police apparatus is openly used to attack political opponents. If you look at the cases that are filed, all of them are filed on opposition people. Almost none are filed on BJP people. There's intimidation, there's acts of violence, and that is going on. we always suspected that there was also direct intervention in the electoral system. And because many times the numbers wouldn't add up to us. And now in Maharashtra, it's crystal clear that that something very wrong happened in the elections. And I'll give you the numbers. 9 crore voters in Maharashtra in Lok Sabha election.
So 90 million.
Yeah. 90 million people vote in the Lok Sabha election. 4 months later, 5 months later, in the Lok Sabha election, 10 million new voters appear.
In the Vidhan Sabha election.
Yeah. Suddenly 10 million new voters have appeared from nowhere. The Election Commission is supposed to give us voter lists for us to check who these people are. We asked them multiple times, where are these people? Where have they come from? Who are they? They don't answer our question. And the most interesting thing of this is the seats in which these people are added are the seats where the BJP wins. So there's a direct correlation between where these people are added and where the BJP wins. In the Lok Sabha, we basically won the election in Maharashtra. And if you look at our scores remain pretty much the same in Vidhan Sabha and Lok Sabha. The only thing that changes is these additional voters, and they all go to the BJP, right? So that it's pretty open and shut. The Election Commission also told us, they said to us that a certain percentage of voters had voted by 5:30 in the evening. And then 6.5 million new voters supposedly voted in the hour or 2 hours after that. But if you do the math, because in India, there's a time lag in the voting machine, it would take 7 or 8 to 10 hours for all these voters to vote. And so we asked the Election Commission, how do you explain that these 6.5 million voters have suddenly voted after 5:30? We didn't see any lines. We didn't see voting going on till 2 o'clock at night. And we'd like you to give us voting, the camera footage, which is compulsory now. And they denied it. And they said, we're not going to give you the camera footage. There's a law for us to get the camera footage. We told them, look, there is a law for us to get the camera footage. They changed the law, right? So it's crystal clear to us, it's crystal clear to Shiv Sena, it's crystal clear to NCP that the election in Maharashtra was not a free and fair election. If 10 million voters are added after the Lok Sabha election, right? And we don't know where they came from. And the Election Commission refuses to explain where they came from. And these are the voters that have made the BJP win. I mean, it's pretty clear as far as we're concerned what's going on. Right? So, and this sort of thing, we've seen it earlier in different states and we've suspected it. But for some reason, it was massively overdone in Maharashtra. So it just became completely blatant. So I would say that the democratic backsliding is on both fronts. It is direct electoral and also institutional.
In recent years,
there's one building in Maharashtra, right? There's one building in Maharashtra which has 4,500 voters who voted from it. And when we went to the building, there's 20 people who live in it, right? And there's 4,500 guys who have supposedly voted from that address. Again, we asked the Election Commission, So these examples, there are 30 seats where the BJP just wins clean, and the only difference is these new voters that have been added to their tally. So it's anybody who looks objectively at the Maharashtra data will tell you there's something very wrong. And this is something echoed by BJP leaders as well. They'll tell us that, behind the lines, they'll also tell us that there's something very wrong with the Maharashtra election.
So the backsliding is both with respect to the electoral side of democracy and the non-electoral side of democracy.
Absolutely.
Both. Yeah. In recent years, you've emphasized caste
Also, the other type of backsliding, sorry to interrupt, is we win an election in Maharashtra, right? And then suddenly, there's a exchange of money, and then our MLAs suddenly turn around and go to the BJP, right? And that has happened in multiple states. It's happened in Madhya Pradesh, it's happened in Maharashtra, it's happened in Arunachal. It was attempted in Rajasthan, where suddenly huge pots of money are thrown, and then a elected government suddenly becomes a BJP government. So there are multiple ways in which this is done.
In recent years, you have emphasized caste injustices within Hindu society a lot. Fighting for lower castes and Dalits has a long history in India. Ambedkar, of course, is a leading thinker in that tradition, but there are several others. For example, Periyar in Tamil Nadu, Phule in Maharashtra. They're not the same, but all fought for lower castes and Dalits and or Dalits. What is your view of India's caste injustices and how should one address them?
I mean, I have slowly sort of become more and more acquainted with it, the depth of it. And I would say that if you asked me 10, 15 years ago, I wouldn't have had the sort of understanding I have now. And the math is pretty simple. Corporate India, right? Top 500 companies, top management, top ownership, absolutely nobody from the backward castes, from the lower castes. And now, backward castes are estimated to be 50 to 55% of the population, Dalits 15% of the population, tribals 9% of the population, right? So nobody from that group of people is in corporate India. There might be the odd exception, right? You look at the high courts, same story. You look at the Supreme Court, same story. You look at top bureaucracy, same story. You look at private medical colleges, same story. You look at private education, same story. We looked at Telangana and we're just horrified with what we're finding. If you look at government contracts across the board, government contracts don't go to lower caste people. So 75%, and I'm not even talking of the minorities here, 75% of Indian people simply do not have access to the contract system, simply do not own anything, right? You look at gig workers, you look at Narega workers, their ranks are full of lower caste people, Dalits, OBCs, tribals. And it's really, really stark. And the thing that surprises me is that, when I push for the caste census, I get this massive pushback which says, this is divisive. And my thing is, look, this is the truth. And if we're talking about building a country, right, if we're talking about India becoming a powerful country, a rich country, we simply cannot tell the bulk of our population that you're not going to participate, right? So to me, the caste census is basically putting the truth on the table, saying, look, this is what the truth is. And there are many people in India who just don't want to hear the truth. And they'll come up to me and they'll be like, this doesn't make sense. Why are you doing this? And I'll say, listen, 90% of India isn't playing in what you call modern India. No. That's fine. But why do the caste census? To me, it's very clear. It's the truth. And people of India need to know exactly the amount of discrimination, the extent of discrimination that's taking place. I don't believe that you should simply exclude the energy, the attention of 90% of your population. I don't understand how a country grows, prospers with that strategy. So to me, transparency, and I think the caste census is a very powerful weapon, is the first step. I was shocked. I must tell you, I'm absolutely shocked with what we find on this front. And it's shocking, the extent of it.
The caste census has taken place in how many states at this point?
We've done it in Telangana,
Yeah.
and I would say that's the one which has been done in a really robust fashion. Karnataka has been done also pretty well.
Bihar. Bihar's
Yeah,
not been-
Bihar. I think what we've done in Telangana is order of magnitude different.
I see.
So, fine, Bihar has done it too. But I think it's got to be done at a national level. It will transform the way we think about development, the way we think about politics in India.
Next question is about secular politics and its role today. How should secular politics, which embraces all religious communities, be formulated in an age dominated by Hindu nationalism, or in a decade dominated by Hindu nationalism? Hindu nationalism, not Hinduism, is what distinguishes the ruling party of India since 2014, now in a coalition. This distinction is important, and Mahatma Gandhi is the most famous example of this distinction. A very religious Hindu who was not a Hindu nationalist. A deeply religious Hindu, as well as an Indian nationalist, but not a Hindu nationalist. Indeed, he was assassinated by a Hindu nationalist who said in his assassination trial that as a Hindu, Mahatma Gandhi's love for Muslims was so unacceptable to him that he had to be assassinated. In contrast, for Gandhi, being a Hindu and having affection for Muslims, or for that matter for any other religious community, were not contradictory at all. In posing a challenge to Hindu nationalism, should one look to Gandhi for ideas, symbols, and inspiration? Is Gandhi still relevant?
Yeah, I mean, if you look at pretty much all great Indian social reformers, political thinkers, and you go back 3,000 years, Buddha, Guru Nanak, Basava in Karnataka, Narayana Guru in Kerala, Phule, Gandhi, Ambedkar ji. You see one stream, right? And none of these are bigots. None of these people were saying, listen, we want to kill people, we want to isolate people, we want to crush people, we believe that things should be done in this one particular way. All these people, the voices of whom are frankly in our constitution, right, are essentially saying the same thing, saying that carry everybody with you, satya and ahimsa, right, truth and non-violence, and you can fit them all in there, right? The search for truth and non-violence. And this is, to me, the bedrock of Indian tradition, Indian history. I don't know of one person who we consider great in India, who wasn't of this type. I can't think of one, right? All our mythological figures. Lord Ram was of that type, right? Where he was forgiving, he was compassionate. So I don't consider what the BJP says to be the Hindu idea at all. I consider the Hindu idea to be much more pluralistic, much more embracing, much more affectionate, much more tolerant and open. And there are many people. There are people in every single state. There are people from every community who have stood for those ideas, lived those ideas, died for those ideas. And Gandhiji is one of those people, probably the best in modern times, but there are many of them.
And all of them are marked by or characterized by the idea of inter-religious toleration.
I mean,
and not giving any particular community of India monopoly over political
Buddha
power.
was about truth and non-violence. Guru Nanak was about truth and non-violence. Basavana was about truth and non-violence. Narayana Guru, Mahatma Gandhi, Ambedkar, they were all about truth and non-violence. Right? And that's our tradition. To me, hatred and anger against people comes from fear. Right? You only hate somebody or you want to hurt them when you're scared. If you're not scared, you don't hate anybody. You're perfectly confident in your ability to deal with anybody. So to me, what a Gandhi or a Buddha or a Narayana Guru is saying is don't be scared. There's nothing to be scared of. Face your truth, face your reality, and deal with it. And this to me is actually the Hindu tradition. So I simply don't view the BJP conception as a Hindu conception. To me, they're a fringe group. But No, in terms of thinking, they're a fringe group. They're not mainstream. They're not mainstream Hinduism. Now they've captured political power, and they've got huge amount of wealth, and they've got power. But they don't represent the large majority of Indian thinkers by any means.
Bharat Jodo Yatra, March to Unite India, is viewed as a turning point in your political career, at least after 2014. When you look back upon the 3 to 4 months when you walked 3,000 miles, about 15 miles a day, trying to reach out, trying to embrace, when you look back upon that experience, what stands out for you?
I mean, many things stand out. I learned many things that I could not even, they were outside my imagination. I learned how to listen to people properly. I learned that you could connect with people instantly in ways that I had never imagined possible. And it was a huge learning experience to see what the different conceptions, ideas in India, the different people, I mean, what they're doing, it's mind-blowing. It's unbelievable. And the dignity of the whole thing, I mean, I've never seen anything like that. That you're struggling, you're hurting, you're trapped completely, and you don't lose your dignity. Not for 1 second will you lose your dignity. And then you see people who have everything, no shortage of anything, and no dignity. So it's a fascinating thing to me. And I realized, which is something that I just hadn't figured out before. And I realized that for some reason, from say 2004, when I entered politics, I did not find love to be a useful word in politics. And it was something that I didn't use. I didn't say, oh, I love my family, I love my mother, I love my sister, I love my friends. But it never entered my political thinking. And suddenly I realized that, what is this? Why has it never entered my political thinking? Right? Why can't I express love for a person that I have never met? And so that happened in the yatra. And it had a shocking impact. I was just blown away. Because suddenly it allowed me to use the most powerful tool in politics, which I just, for some reason, and I don't understand why nobody else uses it. It's not, I don't know. I just don't understand it. I was like, wow, this thing works. It's crazy. I can actually meet a complete stranger and say, I love you, and he says, I love you. And the conversation starts at a completely different place. He's not talking anymore about, oh, I'm having trouble with my farm. It's like a totally different connection. So I learned that. I learned a little bit of perseverance, that, carry on, doesn't matter. But to me, that was the most powerful thing, that you can suddenly use this idea of love for somebody to and connect directly with them. Like I have now before the yatra, I never heard anybody saying to me, I love you. Now, no, serious. I walk out and I'm in Delhi, some scooter wala will, look at me and say, love you. Right? And it's so much nicer. It's so much more pleasant, and it solves so many problems. Like, half the problems are gone when the guy starts off with a frame that, okay, I love you, and yeah, I love you too, now let's talk. You're in a different elevated space. It sounds funny, but no, it's powerful.
No. I mean, Gandhi has quite a few things to say about this, but can you tell this audience how one of the greatest slogans of that march from the south to the north, 3,000 miles, those who don't know, 3,000 miles plus in a matter of 4 months, 15 miles a day, how the slogan of Nafrat ke bazaar mein mohabbat ki dukaan, in the marketplace of hatred, you are creating a shop of love. How did this come about?
It
Can you
doesn't
tell
quite,
this
it
audience?
doesn't quite work in English the way it does in Hindi,
I know.
right?
How do do you have a better translation?
No,
Yeah, okay.
but for my friends who speak English, it doesn't have quite the kick it does in Hindi.
Yeah. I agree, but
No?
I couldn't figure out another way to translate it.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah,
okay, yeah. So in the marketplace of hatred, you're creating a shop of love. Is the best I can do, and I'm sure poets here can do much better.
Yeah.
Tell us how the slogan emerged.
See, when I first started, to me, I was meeting people. And so somebody would come, hello, how are you? Individual connection. And then they'd tell me, this is what I'm thinking. And first I would talk to them. So I'd be like, okay, this is what you're thinking, this is what I think. After some time, I couldn't talk anymore because it was overload. So there were too many people coming, and then for me to just speak became a bit difficult. So I started to go silent slightly more. And then I started to realize that actually there are individual voices there in that yatra, but then the yatra also speaks as a group, as a system, right? And every now and then, suddenly the yatra as a whole would suddenly speak, and it would tell you something, and it would of course come through somebody, through an individual, but it was obvious that it was an expression that was beyond that individual. And this is one of those examples. So we were walking, and this gentleman there was a huge crowd and pushing and pulling, and there was this gentleman on that side, and I could see that he was trying to come in, and there were the cops there. They're quite aggressive, so they were pushing people aside, and they pushed him. So I could see him trying to come in, and then he disappeared. And then after a few hours again, I saw him, but on this side, and again he was trying, and then he disappeared. And then again he came, and I was like, okay, I better now try and get this guy into this thing. So I told Alankar, who works with me, I said, bhai, usko pakad ke lao. No, literally, because you have to literally catch. Otherwise, you can't catch. If you don't catch and bring, the crowd will just sweep him off. So he physically pulled the guy through the
Crowd.
Through the police and through the crowd, and then the guy came, and he came running in front of me, and then he pointed both his hands at me like that, and he says, I know what you're doing. So I was like, what am I doing? So he said, कि आप नफरत के बाजार में मोहब्बत की दुकान खोल रहे हो. So it was an expression not of one person. It was an expression that was much deeper in the crowd, and this one person transmitted it. And then it just went like electricity, because then when I said it in a speech, it was clear that actually it was embedded in everybody. And this guy had just pulled it out of the crowd. So that was the story.
That's the origin of one of the most famous slogans of...
And people ask me, how did you think this up? I'm like, well, I didn't think it up.
It came from the
It came from the crowd.
It came from the people.
And most ideas actually in our work, if you're serious and you're not arrogant, most ideas come like that. Most ideas come from somebody. And I think, so the skill is actually to look and listen for these ideas that India is throwing at you.
Is there a North-South division in Indian politics? Has it been deepening of late? If yes, what can be done to bridge the divide?
See, our constitution is the mechanism through which Indian states talk to each other. Our institutions are the mechanism through which they talk. And if our institutions and our constitution is weakened, states will struggle to talk to each other. So it's not just a North-South divide. Manipur has civil war, right? If you want to take it further, I went to Manipur, and I'll tell you a story. Never happened to me in my life before. We arrived in Manipur. We were going to see one group of people, and the fellows from there said to us, listen, if you're going to come in, we're very happy that you've come. We've invited you. But in your security detail, if there is anyone from that other group, we will shoot them. And so we had to take the people out of my security detail who were from that community. And then we went to this community. And then when we went from this community back to the other community, that other community said to us, hey, if there's anybody in your security detail from that community, please remove them, otherwise we'll shoot them. So, that's not an Indian state. That is some new hybrid that has emerged, where literally communities are at war. And they call it a war there. They call it a war. So there is a north-south divide, there is a rich-poor divide, there is the northeast which is feeling pressurized. And the answer is democracy, deepening of democracy, protection of the constitution, and allowing multiple voices to speak. And there's no problem, because when you allow multiple voices to speak, you release the pressure massively.
Let's turn to economic policy now. And then I'll have a question on national security and foreign policy later. We have 10 minutes left for this section. In several circles, it is argued that you are not fond of market-based economic policies and are only concerned with the welfare of the poor and the disadvantaged. Your party, however, was responsible for embracing market-oriented policies in the early 1990s called liberalization, which increased India's economic growth rate, created a huge middle class, and brought India worldwide economic and business attention. What is your view of markets? Are they necessary for India's forward economic march? Can we achieve higher social welfare, about which you've talked so much, without market-oriented economic growth?
I mean, they're absolutely necessary. I'm certainly not against markets. I'm against monopolization. Okay? And I'm against monopolization anywhere. My argument about the economic strategy of the BJP is essentially that you're giving way too much to few people, right? Again, I have the numbers here. 1% of our population owns 40% of our wealth. You simply are not going to develop the country like that. Right? So I'm not against markets at all. I'm against unfair competition. I'm against capture of economic systems. And that's exactly the argument I'm making on caste. I'm of the view that a small section of society should not control the entire ecosystem, whether it's in caste or whether it's in economics, right? And I think that's detrimental to the future of our country.
So markets and welfare can go together.
They have to go together. You can't have welfare without markets.
Okay.
Right? And then
it's very good to hear that, because that's not what a lot of economists that I talk to, they don't think that you're thinking about. They don't think that you're worried about.
But a lot of people know what I think better than myself. This is a phenomena that people seem to understand what I think better than what I think.
Okay.
And there are many commentators who tend to do that. I'm very clear. The single biggest challenge in front of India today is to create a production system to compete with the Chinese, is manufacturing and the creation of jobs. India is not going to be able to do that without a market, without a liberalized economic system, right? And anybody who talks about social progress, weakening caste structures, also has to accept that you need money to do that. And the only way you're going to make money is by having a production system and by having an open, liberalized economy.
How should India respond to Donald Trump's tariff policy?
I mean, look,
and is it responding the right way?
We don't know how it's responding, because they don't tell us these things. Mm-hmm. Donald Trump is negotiating. He's well within his rights to negotiate. We should negotiate right back. We should understand what our strengths are, what we need, and we shouldn't compromise in areas that are detrimental to us. But he's well within his rights to say that he wants, to change the tariff structure, and it's a negotiation. Fine. I think we're more than capable enough to negotiate ourselves a decent deal.
Turning to foreign policy and national security now, what are India's biggest security challenges? Does Pakistan present the biggest security challenge, or China?
I would say now China and Pakistan are fused.
Yeah.
They're the same. So it's the same security challenge, because they are aligned together. So any conflict we have will probably involve both of them together. But the challenge that I was pointing out, the fact that we don't have a production system, we are failing in manufacturing, and we have a massive unemployment crisis. This, to me, plays into the external threat. So if you have a sound democratic structure, if you have institutions that are working, and you have a production system that's effective, producing jobs, I don't think external forces can be much of a threat. But if you're weak internally, if you're not producing jobs for your people, then the game changes.
What, in your view, should be India's position on Ukraine and Israeli-Palestinian war? Two things.
I would say on Ukraine, by and large, I would be similar to what the Prime Minister is saying. We wouldn't be very different. On Palestine, I think what happened October the 7th was terrible, but what the Israeli state is doing in Gaza is reprehensible. There's no other way to say it. Just murdering innocent children, innocent civilians, that's not the way to solve these problems.
And on Ukraine, you think what India has done is basically right?
We would be similar. Look, we don't like the idea of war. We don't like the fact that young Ukrainian men, young Russian men are dying. We would probably be in a similar policy position as the BJP government on that.
As the current government. Yeah. One final question before we open up. India-U.S. relations have improved a lot since the end of the Cold War. Would you like to see some changes in how India deals with the United States?
China has shown the world how you can manufacture and produce in a non-democratic environment. And the United States and India essentially need to show the world how you can produce effectively in a democratic environment. We don't like the Chinese system of production. We don't like the Chinese system of government. We don't like the authoritarian nature of it. But we have to concede that as far as production goes, they've been successful. And I think huge part of the partnership between India and the United States should focus on this area. President Trump is already speaking along these lines in terms of manufacturing in the United States. I think he'll struggle to get all types of manufacturing into the United States. He might be able to get the high-end manufacturing into the United States. But I think a partnership between India and the United States on manufacturing and developing a strategy for manufacturing in a democratic environment is something that would be very powerful. Today, our conversation is more transactional. There's a defense element, there's a strategic element with it between us, which is fine. That has to remain. But I would add this. I would say, okay, how does India, with its scale and its know-how, partner with the United States to build an alternative, a serious alternative to the Chinese manufacturing system?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So we'll have the Q&A session for the next half hour. You should line up. There are 2 microphones here. So let me suggest. I can see so many people who are keen to ask questions. That's very good. And Rahul Gandhi would like to hear from as many of you as possible. Maximize participation. So here is a thought. We cannot accommodate all of you if you speak for more than 1 minute. So speak for a minute here, and then we go here, and then we go here, and then we go here. So 4 questions per round, and I will have to cut you off after a minute. So be very precise in what you ask. So let's begin with you.
So sorry, just so I get the rules. He's going to ask a question, I'm going to answer, or he's going to ask the question, he's going to ask, and then I'm going to answer.
What would you like? You want to answer the question? Ask and answer.
Yeah.
Okay, let's follow this. Okay.
Yeah, 1 minute applies to me
So
also.
1 minute is also, that rule applies to him as well.
Oh, it does?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Nice.
So, yes, sir, you start and then we'll go here. Yeah.
Thank you so much for this opportunity to ask this question. So, you recently, in your last visit to the USA, you made a tweet speaking directly to Sikhs in India and abroad. And in that, you talk about what India under the BJP would look like, where you ask, will you be allowed to wear gadas? Would you allowed to wear turbans under the BJP? So you create a fear amongst the Sikhs about what the BJP would look like. But you talked about how politics should be fearless. There should be nothing to be afraid of, right? But we don't just want to wear garas. We don't just want to tie our turbans. We want freedom of expression, which under the Congress Party in the past has not been allowed. For example, the Anandpur Sahib resolution, which you're probably familiar with, talks about these Dalit rights, right? Rights of water. It talks about better working conditions, anti-monopoly. It mentions nothing of separatism, but it's labeled as a separatist document. This is something your party has done, and your party seems to lack the maturity to accept the mistakes it has made, such as Sajjan Kumar just now being tried. And there's many more Sajjan Kumars currently sitting in the Congress Party. KPS Gill is hailed as a hero, yet you tell us to fear what the BJP India would look like. But you've never really tried to reconcile
brother, what's the
with the
question?
Sikhs.
Yeah, no. I think it's a minute now.
What's your
the
question?
Point is,
Yes, I will get to my
So what's the
question.
question?
You haven't tried to reconcile with the Sikhs. What attempts are you making? Because if you continue like this, BJP is also going to make its way into
No,
Punjab. Right?
first of all, I don't think that really anything scares the Sikhs. That's the first point. The statement I made was that, look, do we want an India where people are uncomfortable to express their religion? As far as mistakes of the Congress Party are concerned, a lot of those mistakes happened when I was not there. But I'm more than happy to take responsibility for everything that the Congress Party has ever done wrong in its history.
The question is, what are you doing to reconcile? If
I
that's what I would
have
answer
been to the
That was my question.
Yeah.
I have been I have publicly stated that what happened in the 80s was wrong. I have been to the Golden Temple multiple times. I have an extremely good relationship with the Sikh community in India and a loving relationship with them.
Question here.
Hey, hi Rahul, I'm Asad. The Bharat Jodo Yatra came up multiple times, but it was also a very controlled and non-confrontational sort of march. I wanted to ask that, given that some of the BJP's biggest political setbacks in the past decade has been through street-level disruptive protests, whether it be the farm laws or the anti-CNRC protest, why has the opposition shied away from initiating such protests? Like, for example, you said the Election Commission has been compromised. Why not do an immediate gherao or a chakka jam in front of an Election Commission until the demands are met?
We do, but there is a very powerful repressive structure and element that stops us, right? And that's not really visible, but there is a big machine that stops all these types of activities, threatens people, attacks people. We've been involved in a number of these agitations. We were involved in the farmer protests. We were raising it in Parliament. We were raising it outside Parliament. Our party was involved in it, and we pick up these type of protests. But you have to realize there is a system of repression in play that is very aggressive and stops them. I'll give you an example. When the Agniveer issue came up, we started organizing a lot of the Agniveers, and then one fine day, all the people who had lost their jobs because of the Agniveer were called up and said, "Listen, if we see your face protesting, you will never get a government job again." And that was the end of the protest, right? So there's a hidden machine that attacks these type of protests.
Thank you so much, Mr. Gandhi. My question is very, very simple. Effectively asking, why are you coming here at this time now? Just out of curiosity.
Because Ashutosh invited me.
Sure, but why did you
and
accept
I'm
this invitation to come and speak now at this institution?
Because I respect him and I like the work he does. And I thought it would be an interesting conversation. It would be nice to meet young people and understand what they're thinking about.
Thank you. Yes.
Hi, I was wondering that given that India is the third largest emitter of greenhouse gases, to what extent do you think it is the role of the Indian government to mitigate these emissions?
I think it's an important part of what the government should do. And I think making a transition to green, more environmentally sound energy is a good thing. And it's a strategic imperative as well. So I would support that.
Yes.
Thank you for coming and speaking with us. So you often speak against against inequality, against corruption, against political power grabs, and against democratic decline. Yet many argue that your political influence stems from inherited power, shaped by your grandmother Indira Gandhi's consolidation of power and wealth during her tenure, and not your performance and not your grassroots leadership. This political dynasty is weakening democratic institutions just as much as Modi's authoritarianism, especially given claims against your competency in leading. How do you reconcile your rise through your family legacy while claiming to amplify marginalized voices? How do you define democracy within your own party that has long been centered around your last name? Thank you.
Well, first of all, I'm not the president. I'm not the president of my party. The president of my party is Mr. Kharge, who's an elected president. Second, look, it's up to the people of India to decide who they feel is representing their issues. If you go and speak to weaker sections, you go and speak to Dalit communities, you speak to backward communities and ask them what they think about the work I'm doing, you'll get the answer. I'm not going to sit here and sort of, defend my position. I don't need to. I work for certain ideas, I work for certain ideals, and I protect them. And I work really, really hard to protect them. I don't think there's another politician who's walked 4,000 kilometers across my country. And I don't think there's another politician who has gone so deeply into the suffering of our people, at least in our current situation. So I'm actually quite proud of what I do, and I think I will continue to do it. Of course, there'll be people who will tag me as coming from a dynasty, and that's your prerogative, and I'm very, very happy for you to do so.
Question.
Hi, my name is Aparajit. The BJP, for all of its ideological malevolence, is known for being united, being a cadre-based organization. Everyone at the end of the day is a foot soldier. When I talk to my relatives and friends in New Jersey, where I'm from, they sort of see the Congress Party as susceptible to individual egos, infighting, and things of this nature. So do you think that impression is correct? And also, how do you want to match the grassroots level organization that I think the BJP has sort of perfected over so many generations?
The design of the Congress Party is completely different than the design of the BJP. The BJP is designed to centralize power and transmit a message. The Congress Party is designed to decentralize power and listen to the people. So the last thing we would want to do is have a rigid cadre base like the BJP does. It would destroy our DNA. They're two completely different roles, and we're quite happy to sort of have the internal tensions that we do. It reflects the type of conversation, the type of democratic structure that we have inside. A lot of the people in the BJP hate Mr. Modi, absolutely detest him, but they can't say anything about it. We sit in parliament and we hear what the BJP people have to say about him, but you cannot say it. In our party, people are free to criticize. I mean, we have people in our party who criticize us openly. We're perfectly okay with it. We don't have a problem with it.
Yeah.
Thank you for taking the time to speak with us today. I'd like to follow up on the first student's question.
Could you speak into the microphone? Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, we can lower it for you. Yeah.
It's okay. This is okay.
Yeah.
I'm following up on the first student's question. So in supporting the Sikh community, you mentioned being loved by this community and visiting the Golden Temple. I would say this is not the same as listening to the grievances of minorities. So I'm curious what concrete steps you've taken to systematically uplift and reconcile with minorities such as Sikhs and Dalits, and what is the tangible impact of these steps you've taken? Thank you.
Look, I'm not in government right now, so I'm not taking policy steps. But if you look at what I do, wherever there is an attack on minorities, wherever there is violence against minorities, I tend to go there, I tend to support them, I tend to work with them. There are multiple cases of atrocities against Dalits, against women, against lower castes, against poor people. And I try and sort of engage with them and help them. But I'm not in a policy position right now. If you look at the work that the Telangana government and the Karnataka government are doing, and particularly what I was talking about the caste census, those are two completely revolutionary ideas, and they will absolutely help the minorities in those states as well.
Yes.
Thank you for taking the time to talk to us. And my question is sort of, in today's day and age, AI has become more and more important, and the future of India as a great global power will likely depend on AI. What do you think should be AI? What do you think should be India's future on AI, and specifically whether investments in India should be targeting, should be targeting risks that India might have in the adoption of AI in the future, for example, dependence on foreign labs or chip imports from, for example, China. Where do you think India should stand on this?
I think AI has to sit on information network and on data. And without access to data, AI doesn't really mean anything. If you look at who owns data today, China owns most production data. They are the people who know how to make mobile phones. They are the people who understand production data. And the United States, at least in the Western world, in India, owns consumption data. So Indian AI is going to be restricted by the amount of data that you have access to. So there's a lot of data in the government space, and there's a lot of other data that you can use for AI. But India's limitations as far as AI is concerned is the data the AI is going to sit on. So I would think about ways to improve our access to both consumption and production data.
Yes.
Hi. Going back to democratic backsliding, you sort of affirmed that India's status as a liberal democracy and electoral democracy were sort of diminishing, but didn't really say anything about the consequences of that. So I'm curious as to, given today's political climate, what does it mean to be the opposition, or how do you approach being the opposition?
I mean, the role of the opposition is completely changed now. Changed in 2014. There's now a completely different architecture we deal with. I said some of the consequences I mentioned, some of the consequences of this backsliding, the increase in the size of the deep state, the weakening of the constitutional framework, the weakening of our institutions. And these are all things that create foundational problems in our country.
Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi, and welcome to Brown.
Thank you.
My question is, we've seen a global movement of right-wing populism, and some have argued that the BJP is part of this. So there's right-wing nationalist leaders in charge in India, as you've said, but also in the United States, many parts of Latin America, and in Europe. On the flip side, though, Prime Minister Modi has marketed himself as representative of the Indian majority, as a part of a majoritarian movement, as a chaiwala, someone who came up from the grassroots. Why do you, as the heir to a very powerful family, think you're the best messenger to contrast this message and relate to ordinary Indians?
I don't view it as being a messenger. I view it much more as being a listener. So what I do is I try and understand the pain that India's people are going through. I try and understand the unfairness that they're going through, and I try and help that. I don't view myself as a messenger in any way. I like to raise the people's voice, Prime Minister of India, of course, apparently has a direct connection with the divine. And he said that, I speak directly to God. I don't profess that capability.
Thank you.
Yes.
Hello, Mr. Gandhi. As a scientist, it baffles me how much superstitions and pseudoscience thrive in India, and particularly in past 11 years. And these Babas and godmen have been used as a political tool. So what measures will you take to make people more rational and more logical?
I think people are quite rational. I think the number of people who are affected by what you're speaking about are marginal. They're not in the majority. But I would focus on education. I would focus on rational scientific education, and I would spend a lot more money on educating people and also providing them with different types of opportunities.
Thank you.
I think a lot of you get superstitious when you don't have opportunity. You get superstitious when you can't see a future for yourself. So I think there's a relationship between increase in superstition, increase in fear, and the imagination of people. Yeah.
Hi, Mr. Gandhi. Thank you for being here. My name is Mahir. I wanted to ask you about Bangladesh-India relations today. So two aspects of this. First, former Prime Minister Sheikh Hasina is in India right now after she fled.
Are you from Bangladesh?
My parents are, so yes.
Yeah.
After she fled the protest situation in July 2024, and then also the use of rivers and maritime pathways in Bangladesh. So I was wondering if you could highlight on this dispute going on, whether India should return Sheikh Hasina back to Bangladesh so that she can be prosecuted for cracking down on those protests.
I'm not going to poke my nose into that issue.
Okay, then I'll ask you about the maritime. How do you think India and Bangladesh should resolve the maritime issues and river exploitation?
No, I think they should cooperate for a win-win situation, but I'm not going to really comment on the Sheikh Hasina issue because that's I'm not going to poke my nose in that.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Gandhi. I've always struggled internally with reconciling the ideals of freedom expressed in the Constitution and talking to the women in my family and them sharing how unfree, unsafe, insecure they feel. To what extent is this a problem in the political domain? Is it a political failure? Does it require a political solution? And what is your outlook on the state of women in India?
It's a huge problem. And not just in politics, across the board in India. I think the way women are treated in India is atrocious. In politics, there's some good stuff that has happened. There's a reservation for women in the third tier of government. And now, in a few years, there's going to be in Lok Sabha and in Vidhan Sabha. So that's good. But I think it's also an attitudinal thing, and I think a lot of work has to be done to change the approach men have towards women in politics, in business, in other spaces. But I would agree with you that India doesn't treat its women very kindly.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you for being here. I came in initially with the question in mind, given what's happening with research in the US, as an Indian-born researcher training in the US, what India could do in terms of retaining or supporting young scientists. But I kind of want to pivot from that because you've mentioned production or bringing back production in India many times, and production, especially if prioritizing private ownership, can end up actually further impacting marginalized populations, such as the vulnerable populations that you've mentioned many times, especially if it's trying to introduce, as the Ayushman Bharat is trying to do, a more privatized view of healthcare or access to healthcare that is more based on hospitalization rather than prevention. So how could you reconcile kind of increasing production, possibly increasing privatization of things in healthcare and research, but also maintaining...
No, I don't think you have to increase production, increase private ownership in healthcare and education to do production. I think that government has a role in healthcare and in education and should spend much more money in healthcare and education. But government cannot get into the business of production. It's very difficult for government to start making cars and iPhones, and private businesses have to do that. You can of course shape the environment in a way in which workers have protections and benefits, but I don't think the government can get into the business of production. It's not very complicated to balance those two things. Yes.
Firstly, thank you so much for being here. My question is about higher education in India. Every year, there are more and more students from India who are seeking to go abroad for higher education because of this perceived gap in the quality of higher education in India. Do you think that such a gap exists? And if so, What would you say are the problems there, and what can we do to bridge that gap? Thank you.
I think there is a big problem in private education, particularly how expensive private education is becoming. I think there's a role for the government, and I think the government does the best education institutions in India are today government institutions. So I think the government cannot step away from this and just leave it to private players. I think there's a space for them to operate in, and they should operate in it, in education at all levels. I was looking at the medical education system, and literally the medical education system is, if you have money, you go in. If you don't have money, there's a wall in front of you, and that's just, there's nothing more than that, right? So that's not the type of education system that we should be pushing.
Dhruv?
Yeah, thank you so much for coming. I really enjoyed hearing you speak. My question concerns the BJP's online presence. They've gotten really good at spreading propaganda and misinformation on Twitter and WhatsApp, and not just that, they've also moved on to YouTube, where there are a lot of interviews that are one-sided with BJP politicians. My question is, what do you make of this, and what is the opposition and the Congress's strategy to combat this?
I mean, at a very basic level, social media is money, right? So the more money you have, the more social media you have. And the BJP has significantly more money than us. So that's a problem. The BJP also is able to block a lot of the opposition social media. So we are shadow banned. Our YouTube sites, my YouTube site, my Twitter is suppressed, is banned. So we deal with that stuff. But saying that, there is quite a lot of penetration of the opposition in social media, and it's not